So hello again. My name is Janet Glynn, and we are going to go over the May 2020 Saturday Sampler block. This month, we're going to be doing paper piecing. We've done it in past years, so it might be a little bit familiar to you. There's quite a few tools, so let me go through them very quickly. The first one you're going to need is foundation paper. Copies of your pattern are going to go on the foundation paper, and then we're going to sew through the paper to make our block. So I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a second. The next item is very important. It's called an add a quarter ruler. We sell the combination pack of the 12-inch and the 6-inch add a quarter. So what the add a quarter does is it actually has a little bit of a lip on the edge of it. Let me see if I can. So you can put your paper right up against it and trim it at a nice quarter of an angle, quarter of an inch marking. The other two tools that I want to talk about are the glue that's going to hold position fabric number 1 in place. The first one is a Roxanne's Basic Glue. It's water soluble, so it will come out after the first washing. Very nice. This is what I'm going to use today. And the other ones is the Fons & Porter's Glue Stick, which again is also water soluble. So you can use that one as well. All right. Besides the tools that you will need from our shop, there's also card stock or an index card. This is just a nice heavy piece of cardboard that came in the mail. You can use template plastic as well, something that has a nice straight edge, not too thick, but pretty sturdy. And you will need one of those, okay? So we're going to cut our kit pretty simply. The very first piece that we're going to cut is our tan, or our cream, I'll call it. We're going to cut 3 rows. This is doubled, so we're going to cut 3 rows that are 3 inches wide. Each of those 3-inch wide rows is going to be cut into 4 3-inch squares. 2 of those rows we're going to use for the paper piecing are going to be cut on the diagonal once. Okay, so we're going to yield 8 triangles and 4 3-inch squares. So those all be used for paper piecing. The next 2 rows you're going to cut is a 2 1/4 and a 2 1/4. And those are going to be cut into rectangles that are 5 5/8 inches long. Okay? The gold is simply 2 1/4. The dark multi will be 4 1/2. So you'll be getting a square. So cut 2 4 1/2 inch strips, and then cut those into 2 4 1/2 inch squares. And then the last piece is the red, also used in the paper piecing. So 2 strips, just like the cream, 2 strips of red into 4 3-inch squares. Each of those are cut on the diagonal one. So I have 2 layers here. And that's it for the cutting. All right. So you're probably asking, why can't I do this with my normal half square triangles? You can, except not when your block is 12-inch finished. And the reason is the block is actually in 7 sections, equal sections, and that does not divide by 12 evenly. So this is a great opportunity to get the size block that you need at the 12-inch finished for block of the month. I've done a couple extra samples up there you can look at as well. So let's start with the foundation. You're going to make 4 copies of, you're going to go ahead and make 4 copies of the pattern onto the Carol Doak foundation paper. Make sure when you take your copies that you're not rescaling. The copies are the exact same size as your original. Okay, that's very important. Otherwise, you're just going to be making a size that is not going to fit. So make sure when you take your copies, and you'll need 4, that they're the same size. All right. Once you make your copies on the foundation, you just want a rough cut around Unit A and Unit B. You'll notice there's 2 parts to making the bear paw. We're going to do Unit A all at once, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and then we're going to do Unit B. And they're done the exact same way. I'll probably only show you the A for today. All right, so we're going to start with the very first section, which is A1, and that's one of my cream triangles. So each one of these, if you look on the front, this is the side you're going to be sewing on, but the back is where we're actually going to be placing all our fabrics and trimming and pressing and creating our Unit A piece. Okay, so we want to hold Unit A1 piece in place with our glue. And that's the only time we're going to be using the glue, is actually to hold the A1 piece in. So I can look through my paper and I see the outline of where the A1 is. I want to make sure that my fabric is, the wrong side of the fabric is against the wrong side of my paper. So let me come up a little bit closer so you can see this. So you'll see the A1 section through my paper, and we're going to place our fabric so that it completely covers that section. It should just go beyond the 1/4 inch sides on all sides and the solid line between A1 and A2. Okay? So we're going to glue our little corners on the wrong side of our paper just to hold the fabric in place. And then we start paper piecing. So let me get my little dabbing glue, and I'm just going to place little bits of glue into the corners just so my fabric will stick. I'll place that into the corner, and again I can look through the paper to make sure that my fabric is beyond those lines. Okay, so that's the first one. I'll do another one. We're just dabbing the A1 section, grabbing another triangle. And we're going to set all these up. So this is what it looks like from the back, stuck on, and then from the front, and I see through the paper that my fabric covers all those edges and into the seam allowance at 1/4 inch. Okay. A little bit of glue and our triangle. Remember, wrong side of the fabric is going against the wrong side of the paper. And again, I just look through, hold it up to the light, and I can certainly see that covers all the edges. So you're going to do all the A1s at the same time. Don't worry about the B sections right now. We're just working with the A's. A little bit of dab of glue. And again, don't worry, it's water soluble. And we'll go ahead and put that into place as well. Okay, so all the number 1 spots get glued. So from now on, we're going to trim our sections so we know where piece number 2 goes. We're going to sew and we're going to press. And that's pretty much the idea of paper piecing. Okay, so when we trim, this is the first time, let me come up so you can see me again. When we trim our piece of fabric that's in position 1, we're going to place our cardstock on the lower number. So here is the A1 and here is A2. So the cardstock is going to go along the line on the A1 piece, the piece we just completed. And the A2 is going to get folded on top, and we're going to trim this at 1/4 inch using our add a quarter ruler. Okay, so let me show you one more time. The cardstock goes on the section we just finished, which was number 1. I place the cardstock along the line between 1 and 2, and I'm just going to fold back my paper on that line. Okay. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to take our add a quarter ruler. Remember I said it had that little lip on it? That lip is going to lock right onto that cardstock. And you'll notice that there's a little piece to trim. All right? So the lip goes right against the cardstock, right up nice and tight, and we're just going to trim this with our rotary cutter. Okay. So let's make sure I have all this in place. Cardstock goes on the A1, so I'm working from the top of my paper so I can see where the line is. I'm holding my cardstock along that line. I'm just giving my paper a nice little press. I'm going to grab the add a quarter. The side with the lip is going right up against that cardstock, nice and tight, and we're just going to trim this away. Okay? So let's hold this one, get my next one, working from the front of the paper. Card goes on A1. I'm going to fold over the line and trim it. Working from the front, cardstock goes on A1, right along that line, and I'm just going to press my paper over onto the cardstock, get my add a quarter, and trim it. And the last one. So you don't really want any pins or anything on number 1 because it's really hard to put the index card nice and flat against your paper. Okay, so I've got a nice crease right where that sew line is, and I'm going to trim that. All right, so we trim, then we add the next section, which is number 2. So I have these labeled, A1 is cream, A2 is red. So the next section is going to be red. So I'm going to take one of my triangles, I'm going to place it right sides together on the back of my paper piecing. Remember, that's the front, this is the back. We're building our block on the back. And I'm going to place my red triangle, or my number 2 piece, right along that trimmed line. Now there's a couple things that I like to do, and one of them is to take a pin, and place it right on where I would actually stitch on that solid line. So if I place a pin here, it's just kind of like sewing for a second. And what I can do is pull my red piece back and make sure that, again, just like number 1, it's covering, here, let me come up, it's covering all the sections of the outside of this red piece, a little lower. Okay, so I don't know if you can see it, but certainly there's a 1/4 inch on either side of that, so it will fit. Okay, so that's a good thing. So that we're gonna, all right, so we're just gonna get the rest of these. I know they fit. All these pieces are cut a little over exaggerated, and that's the great thing with paper piecing. If you have scraps, they don't have to be any particular shape or size. You just add the piece, sew on the line, trim it, and keep going. Okay? So I'm going to take these, I'm going to flip it over, and we're going to sew on the line. And the nice thing about this is if you have an open toe foot, you're able to locate that line without any worries of maybe the 1/4 inch with the guide snagging on the paper or anything. A nice open toe will show you exactly where you need to go. So we're going to start just outside that 1/4 inch mark, through the 1/4 inch seam, along the line between 1 and 2, and exit out the seam allowance. Okay? So each one of these gets a sewn line on the line. And the only other thing to mention is when you're doing paper piecing, at the end we're going to be tearing all this paper off. So it's nice to have very short stitches when you're sewing. So I'm going to turn my stitch length down a little bit to about maybe about a 1.8 or 1.6. Okay? So I have my 2 triangles in place. I flip it over, and I'm going to sew from this seam allowance down the line, out the other seam allowance. Okay, with a tiny little short stitch. I'll do the next one. You can just pull this out and do a little chain stitch. So here's my fabric. They're right along that perfect cut that I made. I'm going to feed it in, and I'm going to take an angle because I want to come straight through that solid line. So through the seam allowance, right onto the line. It's sewing on the line. It's pretty easy if you have the open toe. And then of course stopping again just past that 1/4 inch seam allowance. Okay, do one more. Place fabric number 2 where I trimmed it, where I trimmed number 1. I'm going to flip over my paper, hold it nice and tight. I'm going to flip over my paper and, whoops, and go ahead and sew, head right for that line. I know there's nothing out there, but you just have to kind of take a couple stitches. There we go, right onto the line. And this is all still holding in place underneath. You can peek if you want, or you can pin it. Just pull the pin as you get to it. Okay, so we're going to do all 4 of these. It's going to go a lot quicker. Take these apart. I'll just do one more 4 because I have 4 of these. All right. So remember, we trimmed, we sewed, and now we're going to press. So come on over to the iron. And each of our pieces on the wrong side of our paper piecing get pressed to that new location. So here's the right side, and here's our wrong side, and we're going to press that toward number 2. So always to the higher number. So we'll press that to number 2. Flip this over. Here's our number 1, and here's number 2 is getting pressed into place. Just hold it on the paper. The paper's not going to burn. Just give it a count of maybe 5 or 6. Oops. We're going to flip that over and press that to the red. Okay? All right. So the next thing we want to do is go back to trim sections between 2 and 3. So now that we've added 2, we're going to add 3, which is another cream. So remember what I said, we're going to put the cardstock on the lower number, which in this case is the 2, and here's my 3, and we're going to fold our paper over and give this just a little pull. All right, get our add a quarter, butt it nice and snug right up against, and we're just going to trim off the excess. One more time. Now that this is pressed, number 2, we're going to trim it. Get ready for number 3. Our cardstock goes on the lower number, which is A2. And A3 gets pulled over. Now what happens if you put this on A3 and fold it over A2? Well, first of all, there's really nothing to trim, as you can see. Okay, so that might be a good indication that you have to put the cardstock on the lower number, just saying. So that was sewn, that's okay, we can just pull this little tear right away from the paper. All right, we're going to keep going. So A3 is cream. So we're going to grab our cream triangle. Now, the triangle looking through the back looks like it's going to go in this position. So we're going to fold the, just turn this right over on itself because I know I want to be sewing on that line. Okay? If you'd like, you can put a pin between position 2 and 3 just so that you can pull that over to make sure that it's outside that seam allowance, that there's plenty of seam allowance. Okay? So we'll go sew between 2 and 3. So let's go over here. And again, we start just outside the seam allowance, which is marked by the dashed lines on our paper, and we're going to sew right onto our solid line, picking up that cream piece. When we end, there is no 1/4 inch beyond this, but we still need to sew a 1/4 inch beyond this solid line for section 5. So go ahead and sew right into there about a 1/4 inch. Okay, let's pull. So what do we do after we sew? We press. So let's go over to the press. And we always press that piece back into the position it should be. What do we do after we press? We trim. So come on over, we'll trim. The lower number here is number 3, and we need to get ready for number 4. So the cardstock goes on the lower number, which is 3, and we're going to fold our paper over. It's okay, just pull this off a little. Get our add a 1/4, butt that right up against that cardstock and trim. Okay. We're looking for a red, which is our last piece on this row. Again, I know it has to go in this position because I can see through the paper. So I'm just going to fold it right back on and keep that lined up. Okay. And now we're going to hold that in place and sew from the corner this time. All right. So again, we have to just go beyond that line. Press. And last one we have is we're going to trim for position 5, which is our multi-blue. Okay, so we're going to turn this. Here's 4 and here's 5. Cardstock goes on the lower number. We turn up the higher number, give that a little tug. Give this a little trim. And we're going to add our blue or black or whatever the dark color is. So I can see the lines going down here. I know this is the line I want to be on, so when this flips over, there'll be plenty. So I'm going to take this and sew the very last one. And look how great that point is right there. That's the nice thing about paper piecing. It's so exact. It gets all the points that you want. Okay, and we'll press this one more time. All right, so once you make 4 of these A units and 4 of these B units, this is what they're going to come out to look like. Here's all my sewing lines, again, extending into the seam allowances. Okay, so 1 to 2, 3 to 4 to 5, nothing different. So once they're all pressed, we're going to trim them with a nice straight edge. So I have my ruler. And we're going to go back to the paper piecing side, to the right side. My quarter is right along that solid line of my ruler, and I can go ahead and trim this down to the exact size it should be. Use all the lines on your ruler to make sure that you're getting a nice 90-degree corner. So I've lined up my edges and I'm trimming away the excess. Okay, once we have these 2 pieces, I have to trim this one real quick. We're going to sew these together and then we're going to tear the paper away. All right, so all of our blocks will be sewn to create the paw. We will have 4 of these, so this intersection right here will lock, and you can also put your pin through, where's my pin? Ouch. You can put your pin through these corner points just to make sure that they are right on the money. So this one has to move just a tad, and we can sew right along that line, or you can sew it 1/4 of an inch. It's totally up to you. All right, and then we'll pull off the paper and press it toward the square. That's pretty much it as far as paper piecing. The last thing you have to do is just put your 9 patch together. So the first thing we want to do is we can sew our paw to this 5 5/8 by 2 1/4. We can sew our center row, and of course our very last row, and then sew our 3 rows together. Okay. Kits will be available starting tomorrow. I believe it's May 8th. We are open for curbside pickup between 10 a.m. and 2 o'clock. Just call us from the parking lot. We'd be happy to run out your kit, any of the items that you might need to make your block, and you'll be safe. And I hope you enjoyed the paper piecing. You can again pick up your kit anytime this month, Tuesdays and Fridays from 10 a.m. until 2 p.m. And I just want to mention, if you do need any of these items to make your block, please email close@snet.net. Let us know what you need and give us your phone number, and we can ring everything through over the phone. We'll call you back when we have it all set up for you. We'll have it all bagged and ready for you to go. Okay? If you have any questions, of course you can call us at 860-793-6639. We'd be happy to help. So enjoy your paper piecing and stay safe. Thank you.